You ever seen those videos on TikTok of random people on the street being asked to rank their video game knowledge 1 to 10, and then they're quizzed by being shown pictures of a game or characters from one? Nothing will humble you more. I would like to believe I could confidently say an 8, but then they would just hit me with some character from a mobile game and I just would lose it. Maybe it's just me, but I believe a lot of longtime gamers take a lot of pride in their hobby. Putting thousands upon thousands of hours into the thing that they love comes with a great sense of gratitude and dedication, which is why if I was in this scenario and they pull up with Spike from Brawl Stars, I'm just walking away. I think sometimes this pride comes with competitiveness. And even from the dawn of video games, competition has always been there. We're always trying to beat our friend's high score or have a better KD or win-loss ratio. I think this also secretly translates to each individual with their history or knowledge of any hobby or interest of theirs. It's like when sports fanatics banter about who's bigger fan of a certain team, or when music heads argue that they knew so-and-so before they were popular. As long as stuff like this is respectful and always fun, I feel like it's perfectly healthy. So personally, when I look at my history and knowledge with video games, I do take great pride in it. But even I, someone that would rate myself an 8 or 9 in one of these challenges, can still acknowledge the holes in my knowledge and history of video games. As I mentioned in my previous video, I grew up in primarily a Nintendo household, so there's a lot of well-renowned experiences that I missed out in my youth. But now that I'm an adult with money, and as a self-acknowledging, well-respected games journalist, I feel it's my duty to not only expand my knowledge of the industry, but also challenge myself. So for the sake of pettiness and to prove to myself, I'm playing a game dressed in roses. A game that for many ends up on their Mount Rushmore of video games, and a game that I've never played before. You clicked on the video, you know what it is. I'm playing 1998's Metal Gear Solid for the first time. Why did I do this to myself? Now here's the thing about this game. It's old. And hey, I'm not afraid of going back and playing old games. Just last year, I may or may not have done a playthrough of Donkey Kong 64 on my Steam Deck, and I had a good time doing so. If I was making a video about that game, I'd probably be able to stretch this video to be an hour long. But this game's a little harder. Not only is it older, but I have no history or touchstones with it, or even the franchise in general. No nostalgia, no memories, nothing. When I first had the idea for this video, I thought it would be easy. I thought I would just play the game and the words would just come to me. But upon starting it, adjusting to the camera, and trying to understand the button mapping, I found myself conflicted. This is a very highly acclaimed video game. Do I play it with that in mind? Do I try to understand what made it so special? Or do I just play it, ignoring all the baggage that comes with it? Of course, as a self-acknowledging, well-respected video game journalist, the latter is the obvious choice. But if so, do I acknowledge the time of its release? Do I forgive its wonky controls and shaky camera because of this? All this really started to stack up, but then I kept playing it and eventually something amazing happened. The game started to click with me. Suddenly, I was immersed. From then on, I didn't feel like I was just playing the game for research and content. I was just playing the game. The story had me intrigued. The characters had me wanting more. It's what you would want out of a modern game. I was in. However, I do have to acknowledge the things that make this game really feel its age. So let's get it all out of the way. You're going to hear me use the word limitations quite a bit, so bear with me. To start, let's address the camera and controls. To me, I feel it's not egregious enough to punish the game for it, especially given its age. However, it really feels its age. While it does feel old, and thank goodness we've evolved from this, it doesn't feel all that punishing. But because of the downside of its time, the game had me mainly concentrating on the radar more than the character or the environment. I understand the limitations at the time, but for a game about stealth and espionage, it does feel like I'm missing out on something when my focus is on the overlay in the corner of the screen rather than the action that's front and center. Perhaps I need to use the first person mode more often, but I found the limitations of having to transition from the overhead cam to the first person cam on top of not being able to move to be more punishing than resourceful. The controls are definitely annoying, but they never get too in the way of the experience. It's forgiving enough to stop time while you cycle through your inventory, but frustrating when trying to aim, first person or third person. But much like most games, Over time, you begin to retain that muscle memory, so this never becomes too big of an issue. And like I said, it's an old game. But aside from the minor inconveniences of the camera and the controls, it still plays surprisingly well. You see, the game knows what kind of game it's trying to be, so as long as you adhere to its rules, you'll never find yourself too lost. From the beginning of the game, it's clear that the game focuses on stealth. You're sent to an Alaskan base with nothing but a pair of binoculars and a secretly kept pack of cigarettes. It's up to you to infiltrate said base using a keen sense of your environment and your bare hands to navigate and defend yourself. Along your journey, you'll find supplies, gadgets, and weapons to increase your arsenal, allowing for new tactics to become available. While your inventory continues to fill with goodies, the game still expects a level of finesse throughout the game. And then there's moments where the game will send 20 goons at you in different directions, essentially forcing you to spray and pray as more and more enemies appear from off screen. These moments feel like there's nothing you can do but hope for the best. Thankfully, health is scattered around the world to pick up, but it's not always in plain sight and definitely not abundant enough to mosey on into any room full of enemies, guns blazing. Now for anyone that's ever played this game, you'll know that there's a lot of almost meta fourth wall breaking moments that are sprinkled throughout the game. These feel as if Hideo is talking straight to the audience, acting as a puppeteer and his players as his marionettes. While many of these moments are technically impressive, most of them felt pretty trivial to me. To be fair, it is unfair to judge some of these moments considering I'm playing ported software on hardware 5 generations later, so of course some of these moments are not going to play out the way they were intended to. After all, we do play games differently than we did 26 years ago. In this case, I was playing the digital version of the Master Collection on the PS5, and tell me if I'm just dumb and missed it, but how the hell was I supposed to know originally what Meryl's codec frequency was without a physical box? A moment that I found really clever was the Psycho Mantis encounter. If you know, you know. But for those of you who don't, the original PlayStation had 4 ports on the front, 2 for controllers, 2 for memory cards. The game would then read your memory card, then during this boss encounter, Psycho Mantis, a psychic, would comment on another game saved on your memory card. Not only that, with Psycho Mantis being a psychic, he would copy your every move, making every action of yours completely ineffective. Originally, the only way to combat this would be to remove your controller from the Player 1 port on the PlayStation, and then insert it into the Player 2 port. While the ported version of this game does not do it any justice, the vision is still there. I envy the players that got to experience this firsthand. But there's one moment I cannot forgive. A moment so sinister, it drove me to actual insanity. I know it's just a skill issue, but damn Hideo, you did it. You did what you set out to do. You successfully tortured me. I hope you're happy. I'm not even kidding. It got so bad that I had to have my girlfriend, who's also a Pokepummel expert, come and help me. And of course, her being the Pokepummel expert, she did it. First try. Didn't even break a sweat. I'm genuinely curious how the audience back then responded to stuff like this. Did this stuff seem revolutionary at the time, or was it just frustrating? Let me know in the comments if you remember these moments. I'm genuinely curious. Personally, I find these moments to be cute and fun, but they never felt pivotal to the overall experience. I'm curious to see if this is a trend throughout the series, and if so, how a modern remake of Snake Eater could adapt them into a modern experience. While moments like these made the game unique and memorable, I think it's indisputable that the thing that made the game so iconic was its thrilling, altruistic love story and the iconic, colorful, badass cast of characters. The story starts out as if it's going to be a typical cliche action thriller, but it slowly evolves into a deep and cathartic experience as more and more layers of the characters' motives and histories are peeled back. It's shocking that in the same year of Spyro and Sonic Adventures, that a game commentates on the repercussions of the dropping of the atom bomb and the rapid production of warheads between the superpowers, all while asking me if love can blossom on the battlefield? What the f? I swear, if I was able to put this game on the desk of my high school history teachers, they would just think, hell yeah. It doesn't take this terrifyingly true past and modern global affairs and just use it as a loose thread for its thriller espionage story. Instead, it uses these real moments and affairs and incorporates it into a story to expose the secrecy behind the sinister and tyrannical actions and intentions of our nations and world leaders. It does all this and still manages to incorporate themes of love and fate, all ingredients for a great foundation in a story that will constantly have you leaning forward in your seat. A foundation strong enough to hold the weight of the notorious cast. Enthusiasts of the gaming community will easily be able to recognize the iconic cast of Metal Gear Solid. Even as someone that's never played a Metal Gear or Metal Gear Solid before, I can still recall hearing a mention of these characters at some point in my life. So finally, after all these years, I've been able to put a face and a voice to these iconic characters, and I can say I was not disappointed. To no surprise at all, these characters kick absolute ass. Every character feels so unique and special from one another, but also, why did they have to go so hard on the names? Sniper Wolf? Vulcan Raven? Psycho Mantis? Revolver Ocelot? It's so unnecessarily over the top, and I love it for that. But it's not just all show. You can really see the thought out writing and planning that went into establishing what makes each character so complicated and compelling. Even with half of its cast only being animated face models, you still get compelling dialogue exchanged amongst one another that feel as if they have a real history with each other and the world they live in. This is all elevated by incredible performances behind these characters. Even the little moments you have from simply saving your game or even dying result in incredibly surprising performances. Shout out to David Hayter for killing it as Snake. You can see the love he has for this character. Even 20 years later, he returned to voice Snake once again. Not for a new entry in his franchise, but for Smash. Just a couple line reads. That's dedication. Both David and Snake have and always will be cemented as icons in the gaming world. Quick shout out to the music too, that shit goes hard. 26 years later, you can still see the ambition and love that Hideo and team put into this project. Even in 2024, I can look back and appreciate the attempt and the execution of a powerful narrative in a video game. It's games like this and Final Fantasy VII that paved the path for future games to have compelling narratives. Perhaps I'm just a very nostalgic individual, but I find the root of trends in video games to be very fascinating. And to go back and find that they were able to pull something as bold and risky off like this, I really find a deep appreciation for it. I may not have been playing this or was even alive back then, but I see what it's done for the industry and myself. Uncharted 2 is one of my favorite games of all time, and while it's not the most innovative game when it comes to its narrative or gameplay, it does make me think, would we have gotten it if not for games before like Metal Gear Solid? Let me know what you think. Is the original Metal Gear Solid as good and or important as we make it out to be, or is it just now an old game? Overall, I had a really good time going back and playing this. As frustrating and outdated as it can feel sometimes, I still believe that it's absolutely playable today, and I cannot say that for a lot of games back then. I'll say one thing that really surprised me was how involved Hideo was in this project. I knew that this was like his baby, but damn, he did like a little bit of everything. This makes me especially excited to one day visit Sons of Liberty and see if that vision of his continues. I would love to jump into the sequel right now, but by the time I'm done playing this and editing this video, it's probably going to be close to the release of Astrobot, and I'm absolutely going to dive into that game and hopefully try to make a video about it. So look forward to that. I think it's going to be a good time. I believe they're going to knock that game out of the park, and I am in desperate need of a 3D platformer right now. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.